The Shanahan tree offense has taken the NFL by storm. Sean McVay went and won a Super Bowl. Kyle Shanahan was Patrick Mahomes' magic away from a Super Bowl ring of his own. Matt LaFleur has been to 2 NFC championship games already in his short tenure as head coach. And Zach Taylor also has been to a Super Bowl. So where does Matt LaFleur stand in this hierarchy of coaches? Guys he grew up with. How does he compete with them? How does he find his voice? Jourdan Rodrigue from The Athletic researched and talked to these coaches about all of it for a new docuseries coming up for The Athletic. She joins us today on the show to talk about what she found, what she learned about Matt LaFleur, and a lot more.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. As I mentioned, Jourdan Rodrigue from The Athletic on the show today to talk about her new series called The Playcallers. It is about the true football geniuses behind the revolution offensively that is sweeping the NFL. It is a long conversation. It is a terrific conversation. I am so grateful that she came on to give us a preview of it. I cannot wait for this series to come out. Let's get into it. Joining me now from The Athletic and the voice behind a new series called The Playcallers, Jourdan Rodrigue, who covers the LA Rams. And for my money, I'm going to embarrass you now, Jourdan. As good as anyone we have in the business at covering their team, I learn something every time I read your work. I'm really excited for this series that you're putting together. I want to know what spurred the idea. What made you go, I want to dig into this thing?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for making me sound smarter than I am. I appreciate that. Flattery is awesome. Thank you very much for saying that. I really enjoy your work as well. So stoked to be on with you today. That's a really big question, because to answer that, it also tells part of the story itself, which I'm happy to do. So in 2020, after the NFL lifted some of its lockdown restrictions, and players got to go back to practice, and I got to go to Rams practice and stand on the sideline and just sort of see what's going on. Like I love to do, as is the daily life of at the time, as a daily beat writer. I still am, but I work on these projects as well now. And Sean McVay had just hired Brandon Staley to be his defensive coordinator. And in my previous experience with watching offenses and defenses practice against each other, it was very regimented. There are things that the offense must install and must troubleshoot. There are things the defense must install, must troubleshoot. There are some opportunities for competitive periods, for live periods, but it's all structured, right? And a Sean McVay run practice was generally very much the same. In fact, it often skewed toward offense, because there's this running sort of inside joke among some of the defensive players that he's just going to call something random and try to get you just so he could see how it works kind of thing. And Wade Phillips was really great, and he pays a lot of respect to Wade Phillips for allowing him to do that, to get their offense off the ground back in 2017. Sure. So he hires Brandon Staley, and I go out to practice, and it's literally nature has overtaken the Rams building with everyone out of it. So there are literal hawks circling overhead, and there are actual ground squirrels scampering across the fields and into these burrows that litter the sidelines on the hills in dry Thousand Oaks, California, up in the hills and the mountains. And so it's already a unique atmosphere. And I walk out there and I stand behind the defensive backs, the secondary, because I had gotten a tip from a coach that that's where to be as they installed this new system. And it's not like anything I've ever seen before. Everything was alive. It just was so competitive, first of all. Obviously there's rules and restrictions, what they can do, what they can't do within the CBA, but it was so electric and intense. And like these two coaches were scheming against each other. There was not a ton of, okay, you install this now in this period, I'm going to install this. Instead, it was, let's go. And the collision and the clashing of it was something really special at the time. I remember thinking I walked into one era of football and left in another era of football, because what you were seeing was the perfect foil at that time for what Sean McVay's offense was, the iterations of it that were 2017 and 2018 and even some 2019. And that defense with the Vic Fangio concepts that Brandon Staley brought over, but also the coverage concepts that he workshopped at John Carroll, it was the perfect foil for Sean McVay's offense. And then I started, that's why Sean hired him.
Yeah.
Because not just so he could get that for himself, but so he could workshop against it, compete against it every single day in practice without anybody being able to see it, because it's not game tape, right? So having that system for himself, not only to build up a tolerance to it, but also to figure it out, but also to figure out how to evolve his own group forward out of those clashes and those truly epic collisions. It was so, at the time, it's almost like the impact of what it was didn't hit you. And then it was, about a year later where I start seeing all of these ripple effects come out of the Rams that year, having the number one defense, and how it changed everything about how Sean wanted to run his offense, including trading his quarterback, and how all of these little things happened because one person made a decision to put themselves in a truly competitive and very stressful, high pressure, high stakes, evolutionary environment. And this ripple effect that happened. And so then obviously that's the story, right? That's the story of this series, is the play callers. And that's why these coaches, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Mike McDaniel, Matt LaFleur, that's why I chose them, because they all were in those environments together, whether it was Houston or in Washington. And they started making decisions that led to other decisions that led to these catalysts and ripple effects as they've started to branch out as individuals. And it's really started shaping the way that the league works and the way football works in this league.
Well, and what's interesting as well, and this is something that I'm sure we can talk more about, is in the 90s, you had Bill Walsh into Mike Holmgren, and then all of the branches that came off of that. And now you're looking at this with these four guys, Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel, he goes to Miami. Who does he grab? Jalen Ramsey and Vic Fangio. And then you have the Packers. They get rid of Mike Pettin. They bring in Joe Barry, who was in LA. It has become this, for lack of a better phrase, incestuous pool now that you have with all of these coaches. And it creates this competition. When you're talking to these guys, characterize the way that they view that competition, because sometimes when you have brothers or friends, you have a group of guys that really just want to beat the crap out of each other. And you also have the guys that are like, nah, that's my guy. And so it becomes difficult. And we've heard that from Matt LaFleur here. He doesn't like going against Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh, although the Kyle Shanahan stuff might be getting a little more tense now. How did you find the way that they talk about each other that way?
Yeah, it's almost like, again, it's like alive, right? It's oxygen. So it's around them at all times.
Yeah.
They are, I've said this a lot, because this is a very much a human story. This is a football story. And we go back, it's funny you mentioned the Bill Walsh Holmgren stuff, because then it's like, well, yeah. And Mike Shanahan was a Bill Walsh disciple. Yep. And then his catalytic decision that he made was to go partner with Alex Gibbs and his outside zone and bring those West Coast meticulous passing game elements with that outside zone. And who's watching him do this the whole time? His son, Kyle Shanahan, who then goes on to make a series of catalytic decisions himself. So it's like everything leads to something else, to something else, to something else, to something else. And in that, there is this competition, this deep-rooted competition that is something that they all need and they all know that they need, but they're sort of now all doomed for each other is kind of it's kind of how, I know it sounds dark, but I don't mean it in a terrible way. It just is. They're all linked. They're fated to be linked to each other, not just because of the environments that they created in. And the chaos that they inflicted upon one another,
Yeah.
which is illustrated throughout the course of the series, but also the idea process and what came of that, and getting used to, that's where my best ideas come from, are within the heat of competition. So you almost are forever entrenched and gravitating toward that type of environment, because that's where you're one of those unique people that function the best in that environment. And so I think that's why, even though, some of them won't necessarily talk about each other, and some of them will, and some of them will sort of walk around the topics of one another, and some of them will dive right in and be very, very honest. But it's all with this sense of like, it's so normal. It's just the oxygen of the space that they occupy is to have that competition, and to have, in some cases, have it be a functional competition, and in some cases, historically, have it be dysfunctional competition.
We'll get back to our conversation with Jourdan Rodrigue from The Athletic in just a second. But before we do, take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just $20 and you'll land at $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to be the first to hit a home run. That's a fun prop. Every time I love to parlay a couple of home run props. All of that is fun because you're getting like plus odds. All of that on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. Like, you take the money out, it's in your bank account. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, it's pretty much the only thing to bet on if you want real-time betting stuff, American sports style. It's the WNBA, it's golf, and it's baseball. So give yourself a shot. Let's have some fun. Go sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That 10x bonus bets match. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Everydayers. Tomorrow on the show, we have that rookie orientation series on Karl Brooks. This is going to be a fun one. Zach Jackson from The Athletic. We double up on The Athletic. He's going to be on the show to talk about a feature he wrote on Karl Brooks, what he learned, all of that good stuff. And then later in the week, Matt Derry from Locked On Lions also going to be on the show. It is going to be a great time this week on Locked On Packers.
There's so many directions I want to go here. So I'm trying to, like, as much as I can, narrow in on how I want to order all this. But what was your view of Matt LaFleur from afar? You're not in Green Bay every day. You don't get a chance to talk to him every day, but they're on TV. You see him, like, you have a relationship to him as someone who covers a different team. Mm-hmm. From your relationship with Sean McVay, conversations, all that stuff. What was your impression of him before you got a chance to actually sit down and talk with him extensively?
Yeah, so the Rams seem to be on the road in Green Bay every year. So
yeah, that's also true.
So I've also had, we do the opposing coach conference calls and all of that. And he always struck me as someone who is a little more candid, especially knowing that Sean was going to go back and be listening to the duration of the call, right? So he would always be a little bit more candid talking to us, on the ground in Los Angeles over the last several years. But from afar, it was always like, to me, and especially it becomes clear through the context of the story, he's kind of the one that's gone and struck out on his own the most, right? And I don't say that to belittle anyone else's experience, but he's had to do things on an island that others haven't. Like, even when he and Kyle Shanahan were with Matt Ryan together in Atlanta, they were together workshopping with and learning how to deal with a veteran quarterback who was super talented, but also had things that he did a certain way for years and years and years. They did that together, and then, and Mike McDaniel too. I mean, they all did that as a group, but then Matt kind of strikes out on his own. And I think has been intentional over the years of not wanting to be in a certain comfort zone and sort of trying to gravitate, when he goes to Tennessee, when he leaves LA, those types of things were not necessarily in the moment being encouraged of him to do in terms of his, confidants, people who he had, asked for advice from. Certainly Sean did not want to lose him either.
Right.
And
there's a selfish human part of this too. No, I want you to be my coach.
Right. Yeah. And yet he still went for it, probably to see how far he could push. And then also probably for a lot of some reasons, Andrew Whitworth in the series illustrates it really great. Like, you have to find what dark places you can go to see how you can get out of them. And I'm not saying that Matt LaFleur was like seeking out, those conflict places or anything like that, just outside comfort zone, like seeking out, what am I actually made of, away from this group, away from people I know, away from people who know me so well. Who am I without? And so, he's kind of doing it again right now. And so that's what I think has been really interesting. It's not necessarily like a first impression, because it's obviously been backed by a lot of reporting and conversations and things like that. But that's kind of who Matt LaFleur has been in this story. If you're talking about the arc of all of these people, is like, he's the one who did the stuff with the veteran quarterback by himself. Well, not by himself. He had a great staff around him, but away from the pack of these other guys. Right. And, how do you do that? This is also a quarterback who is, a Hall of Famer, who is one of the best the league has ever seen, the sport has ever seen, and also very, very particular. Right. And so
diplomatic, continue, yeah.
And so how are you navigating that? How do you remove the part of yourself that's like, I really want to show who I can be, in order to, away from all of these people who I'm sort of known for, right? Like I'm this in this band, right? Like, how do I strike out and become this person with an identity, while also understanding that's not going to work if I try that, because of, I'm working with this quarterback who, there will be compromise involved, because that's the way to pull greatness out of all of us. And now he's doing it again, right? He's starting over essentially again, with a lot of young players on this roster. And we're going to really see kind of like the culmination, I think, of all of these lessons that he's learned. And that to me is how, that's the impression I get. And it's like the impression that he leaves with how he coaches and calls games too, in my opinion. I think all of these guys show us who they are by how they call games, by how they assemble their offenses, by how they, run sequences and deploy certain schemes and concepts, by how impatient they are with some of their calls in the case of, Sean McVay and his tendencies to go away from the run, or to how sort of seeking of certain types of control in terms of, Kyle wanting all of the answers to the test to be within his run game, right? And you can always depend on that, no matter what else happens, no matter who else is trying to stage a comeback, right? You can always depend on the run game. And it's like these guys are showing us, part of the reason why I picked doing this series on them specifically is they're showing us who they are. It's like so millennial, right? Like they're showing us who they are with like how they do what they do. And I think it's been fascinating, and Matt's no different.
Did you talk to them about the potential dangers of trying to, for lack of a better phrase, show how smart you are? Because I think it would be easy. Sean McVay labeled like the wunderkind of the NFL from day one. Kyle Shanahan is the scheme lord. And then you have these other guys sort of fighting for those pieces. We haven't even mentioned Zach Taylor, who, by the way, took his team to a Super Bowl. He's on this tree as well. So like, did you get a sense that they feel the weight of this pressure and have to fight against saying, no, look how good I am at this?
I think less so the look at me. I think that's always going to be a battle when you are of an elite group of people in a profession. I think that is something that is going to be a constant and eternal. How much of myself should I show versus how much of myself do I want to show? How much of, my abilities should I show versus how much, should, and there's themes throughout the course of the series. And yes, those conversations did happen. And there's themes throughout the course of the series about the idea of control and how much control do you take on yourself as the play caller, and how does that shape your mindset of what you think really wins and loses games versus how much control do you cede to the people who are actually doing it and actually making these things happen, who are the players. And it explores the human toll of that struggle and the human toll of of what that can be and what it can mean, not just for the coaches themselves, but also for the players that, you've seen it for better and for worse, the people on the other side of those struggles. And I think that's something that it's very human, right? Because it's complicated and it's nuanced. And there's also this theme, kind of like what you mentioned, where you always also have to be first to find the new idea. And that's universal in coaching, frankly, not just with these guys. And, I do want to point out too, they do pay a ton of respect to like the all-time greats, the Bill Belichick's, the Andy Reids, those guys. But like the difference with this group is that they're also trying to separate themselves and their identities from the system, right? That you can see it the way they've all changed their offenses in various ways. And we explore that in great detail, but also like you can understand why they're trying to forge their own branches, right? And some of them have been very good at it, and others are still finding their way. And it's interesting because you're also doing that. What makes them unique amongst each other and in the league is they're also doing that against people who know them better than anyone else on the planet. But you can never talk about it with those people because they're all trying to destroy each other, right? Like you're trying to win football games.
Yeah.
So it's so complicated and the dynamic is so strange. And, I've been reporting this over the last year. And so like living in that space constantly has been really eye-opening. I could personally never be a coach is what I'll say, obviously like that's just the headspace that you're in at all times, but also that sense of like, that constant innovation loop, right? And you have to be the one who's first and have the confidence and ability to be first, but you'll be hunted, right? Everyone else who wants a piece of that will be sprinting after you with everything they've got and all the tape they can get their hands on and all your assistant coaches who they can get their hands on and all of that is happening. And then inevitably the rubber band snaps back, right? And you have to like get to a new rubber band before you get snapped by the old one, right? And it's this constant, like, how do you know when to jump? And we dive deep into all of those elements throughout the course of the series.
All right, we're going to finish up here with Jourdan in just a couple minutes. But before we do, thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Earlier in the week, we talked about this youth movement on the show, about how it's going to be the youngest team in terms of the pass catchers in like 30 years, other than the 0-16 Browns. Not a great company to be in. I wrote about that for The Athletic. I expounded on some of the things we talked about and why I don't think it's a big deal over at The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. And I would also love for you to check out Locked On Sports Today. All the biggest stories in sports with our unmatched network of experts to give you all of the local knowledge that you need, especially you're putting together fantasy football big boards right now, looking to get in on some best ball leagues, underdog fantasy, crushing the game. So there's all sorts of things that you can use this knowledge for. Other than you can just be like a sports fan who wants to be up to date. Locked On Sports Today gives you all of that.
It's fascinating to me, and I've been thinking about this a lot over the course of the last few months with the Packers and Jourdan Love, because Matt LaFleur is really going to be the first of these coaches to handpick his guy. Outside, I get Zach Taylor, but they had the number one overall pick. I think that's a little bit of a different situation. But we saw in 2020, Aaron Rodgers bought into the system. He's an MVP. And what did Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan both go out and do? They both took big swings for high upside quarterbacks. And in 2021, you saw Matt LaFleur and Sean McVay kind of arrive at the same idea for how to deal with these two high defenses. Let's spread everybody out. Let's play four wide. And let's sling the. So it's just interesting that while they're all trying to find that new idea first, they're still steeped in something so similar that ultimately they arrive at the same answer a lot of times. And it is, you have to be first, because it could be the difference between 2 weeks of winning versus not. I want to ask you about the Jourdan Love piece of this. I don't know how many of your conversations took place before and after Matt LaFleur knew he was going to be coaching Jourdan Love this season. But what impression did you get from him on what that challenge was going to be like, what he was excited about, what he was worried about? What were we able to get there?
Okay, so I will tell you a little behind the scenes here. My final interview with Matt in Green Bay was like 2 days after my colleague Matt Schneidman dropped the big
cool.
the big article, like the autopsy article. It was such a great great job by him. But I was sitting there and I was like, the meme of who is it? Donald Glover, like walking into the room that's on fire.
With
like
the
that
pizza.
was me. I was like, is that what I'm walking into right now?
Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Appreciate you, man. Yeah, no, but it was fine because we had obviously been doing, you know, the reporting well before that, but also, and Matt did a fantastic job, by the way, on that. But it was interesting because that's very much that I walked in as the final pivots happening, right? Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
I walk in the building as the shift is occurring, and you feel that when you're there. You feel change, right? And it's hard to describe exactly what that feels like, but you know it's there. It's occurring all around you. It's an energy. And Matt LaFleur was, and we will go into this. I don't want to give too much away because we do go into this in the last episode of the series. I'm going to get you guys on the hook for all 5.
Yeah, that's a tease, ladies and gentlemen.
In episode 5, we do go into it and we talk about who he's studying. And he's very open about it. And we talk about what comes next and sort of what that means to try to innovate. And he's kind of, you know, I don't want to make it sound dramatic at all because he's got a great group of people around him, but in a way, separate from all these other guys, again, he's a little bit on an island because here he goes again, like out into the wilderness, you know, and he's going to try this again. And, you know, and he's going to try to build something and it's the same place, but it's a very new place that he's in. Right. And so, and we do talk about it. And so it was interesting, you know, to see, you know, at that point, you know, spring workouts are starting to close and everything. And so you as coaches are assessing the body of work that your players have put in that spring. And you're also troubleshooting what works. Let's make some buckets. Does this work? Put it in that bucket. Does this not work? Put it in this bucket. Could we change this idea and morph it to something different? There's a great example. You know, Matt has had this experience before of maybe something works, but it doesn't work as well as this other thing could. So we're going to try this other thing, even if it means a pivot. And there's this great example in episode 2 of the series of him and Sean McVay doing the exact same thing in 2017. So you could see the patterns, you could see the tree rings. And what was really cool was that he was pretty open about like what he's studying right now as they sort of, the Packers themselves sort of enter this new phase in their timeline.
Without giving too much away, I do want to ask as we're wrapping up here, Matt LaFleur got some questions about studying Brock Purdy. And he bristled, and I was kind of glad he bristled because I bristled listening to those questions because number one, I think it downplays Jordan Love's talent. And number two, I feel constantly for these guys because they're always going to be compared to one another.
They're doomed. Yeah.
They are. They are. I love that phrase. They are doomed because they're fated together in a way that they are inextricably linked from one another. Robert Saleh and Matt LaFleur now even more than before in a weird kind of way because of what happened with Aaron Rodgers. But what impression did you get from him on that challenge of let's find these other things that are working while also trying to make them new? Because he was always clear. This is not the Matt LaFleur offense. This is the Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers offense. This is the Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers and Adam Stenavich and Luke Butkus and all of these guys. And before that, Nathaniel Hackett. So when he's looking at these other pieces, to the best that you can, understanding that you can't speak for him and then you don't want to spoil everything.
Yeah. Tough line to walk. Yeah.
Yes. How does he approach trying to pull from these other pieces while still making it his thing?
Yeah, it's such a great question. It's a huge question. And it's also, like you said, there's a difficult line to walk. Obviously, I'm not going to psychoanalyze Matt LaFleur, right? Luckily, he does.
You could.
That.
We'd let you.
He does that just fine himself, by the way. So listen to the series.
I bet he does. I can't wait to listen.
So, yeah, I think it was eye-opening. I was entering a space that was different from all the other buildings that I got to go in because of what the project at hand is. They're deciding who they're going to be in this new era with a quarterback who, you hear amazing things about, right? But has to get in games, has to play, has to actually make theory and philosophy tangible, right? And so it's interesting because the studying that's involved. And again, I'm sorry, I don't want to give too much away, but like the studying that is involved, like the amount of stuff that this group is watching and ideating and like thinking about. To me, it's like, this is me speaking. I'm not speaking for Matt LaFleur. To me, it would be like a very specific type of energy where you have some excitement over the newness of everything and over the ideas that, you know, as a coach, you get to try stuff, which is all you want to do as an offensive coach anyway, is just like try cool stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
As a person in life, that's my goal. Try new stuff.
Exactly.
Try cool new stuff.
Try cool stuff. The Matt LaFleur motto. Yeah. So
I love it.
like,
forget all gas, no break. We're doing try cool new stuff.
Actually, him and Robert Saleh. Okay.
They're fighting over all gas, no break. I know.
But you guys, there's a new one. There's a different one that you guys will love. So just be ready for that.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
One. Yeah. So it's like that. It's a unique energy where it's a combination of that excitement probably, right? And that enthusiasm, but also like, I would think anxiety too, because you don't know if the answers are going to work. And then you compound that with, even if you find the answers that do work, nothing will work the same twice, because again, once you find the new answer, you are hunted. Right. So it's that constant battle that, again, it ties back into some of the themes we cover in the series, where it's like, that's the constant battle that you're facing, whether you're with a veteran quarterback, and probably especially when you're with a quarterback who doesn't have a lot of experience, who you're trying to build something with, and for, frankly, and to help them be as successful as they possibly can, while also allowing that quarterback to thrive in the ways that they can thrive. It's a fine line to walk, and it certainly, to me, would probably be a very unique type of energy to feel.
The series is called The Playcallers, about the rise, evolution, and clash of the NFL's youngest coaching tree through the voices of those inside it. Jourdan Rodrigue is the mastermind behind the masterminds. And go find all of her work at The Athletic as well. Jourdan, this was awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. Great questions. Thank you.
All right. Thanks to Jourdan for coming on the show. Absolutely wonderful to talk to her. I think she is one of the best we have. I really do. Her ability to break things down, to get incredible insight. And it helps that the Rams, like, they do things differently. They're willing to talk about doing things differently. And so she gets these incredible insights from Les Snead, from Sean McVay, from the powers that be in LA. But no one else is on the beat is getting that. She is. So I think that she does a terrific job. And so be sure to be following the work that she does over at The Athletic, these projects. This project is a can't miss for Packer fans. Absolutely. All right. Back tomorrow with our Carl Brooks rookie orientation series. Then our interview on Friday with Matt Derry. We did a little off-season crossover episode. That's going to be a lot of Packers talk as well. But just to get a Lions perspective on it, I thought it'd be fun. We had some fun. I always have fun with Matt. So a couple of cute guys talking ball. It's going to be a fun time. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you'll find Locked On Packers. And anytime you want to come and hang out with us live, that can be done over on our Locked On Packers YouTube page. So you can stay Locked On Packers.